Welcome to the first turn. I'm your host, codename Hyena, and today I am joined by Llama, where we talk about Warhammer 40k 10th edition details that have been revealed in the last week. We talk about the 2 new Battletomes for Warhammer Age of Sigmar, Ossiarch Bonereapers and Soulblight Gravelords. We also talk about model reveals coming this week, including Vashtor, Azrael, Dante, and the man himself, Lion L. Johnson, and our plans for these new models, and more. Enjoy!
Well, before we start, we have a new segment on the show.
New segment.
And that segment is, what are we drinking tonight?
So for those listening who want to drink along while we talk, we went pretty simple, but simple sometimes great. We've got champagne.
Extra dry champagne. We've got orange juice. We've got ice. Tonight, we are going mimosas.
Mimosas.
So, what you may or may not have realized is most nights, we're here with drinks.
We have drinks while we're on.
But I figure, why not share what we're having tonight? In case you were interested and you want to follow along.
Yep.
If you're of age in your country.
Obviously.
So, I've got mine's a Bellini. I have peach juice as well. But we've got our mimosas. Yep. We've got some topics we want to talk about tonight. So let's get right into it. Not much was going on this week until it gained some serious momentum leading up to today. A lot of interesting things have been revealed in regards to 10th edition developments.
40k 10th.
Some things they're changing about 9th before the 10th edition rollover happens. Some of the campaign reveals, kind of things are coming to fruition here. There's kind of a lot to talk about now. So I guess I want to start with new stuff we've heard about 10th edition.
Yeah.
So 10th edition is a proper edition change. Let me tell you, it sounds like it's one of the biggest edition shakeups since.
Well, we had the 7th to 8th was huge.
It was, but I don't think it was like this.
But I almost think like 2nd to 3rd.
Yeah, or 5th to 6th.
Because like when I remember 2nd to 3rd, which dates me, it was their game was kind of ridiculous, where it was weird things like if you piled in with attacks, each attacker be on the first got an additional attack. You had things like combat drugs that could like double all these stats across the board. It actually didn't feel too dissimilar to 9th, where the lethality was really high, but they didn't have some of the effects they have now. And then they went to 3rd, and that changed everything to a system that lasted basically through 7th.
Right.
And then 8th was a big change from 7th, but I think for the most part it was still, like the stat line was still the same. Right. And the way the rules were laid out were kind of the same.
Well, we had changes to vehicles. We had changes to order of fighting because initiative was gone.
Yep.
So now it was just alternating, and whoever charged gets to fight first. That was a bit of a change, but it wasn't huge, right? That wasn't enormous. This is properly large.
So far. Yeah.
Right? I guess we also lost 7th and 8th unit attachments for characters. That's coming back. We lost Universal Special Rules. That's coming back, which I'm a fan of, having a glossary of terms.
Yep.
That you can save space on the actual unit's card by just referencing a keyword, a rule type, or whatever, and then you can look it up somewhere else later.
And then the thing is, whether universal, it's stuff that everybody should know.
Right.
So there's not as much mystery when you go up against a unit from an army maybe you haven't play tested against. And it's like, oh, what's that word in bold? Oh, that. Okay, I know that means on a 6 this happens. Yeah.
But we had heard information that I was alluding to here about some characters now, when they're purchased for the army, in some way, we don't know if they can only be taken as attachments to a unit, but you can attach some characters to a unit. That unit then gains benefits from the attached character instead of having auras, like they were talking about. Some units apparently will still have auras because they don't actually attach. Certain bigger characters that are not able to integrate themselves into a unit will still have auras. So it sounded like the Lion had a rule where he's a lone agent, i.e. he doesn't join a unit, but gives auras to nearby things, but then cannot be targeted outside of 12 inches by shooting attacks if he's within, however many inches of an infantry unit. So he still has kind of like the old Lookout Sir rule.
Yeah.
But
it's like the assassin rule, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and I have to imagine Gilliman will function similarly, where he's got auras as a lone wolf character.
Yeah. I assume the bodyguard rule of previous editions is going to go away, and instead it's going to be this, right? Where it'll be this like load agent, like a hive tyrant cannot be targeted by shooting attacks outside of 12 inches while it's within so many inches of a tyrant guard unit. Right? So it'll still, instead of it being like, well, bodyguard, that's the keyword, it'll have something else. And then it'll function exactly the same. You know?
It's funny is that's been one of the units historically that has always done that kind of correct within an edition.
Yeah.
And then whereas other armies either had a useless version or a version that was way too easy to manipulate, like hide my character in the building, but he's still benefiting from the unit that's standing in the open, or vice versa. So
what I wasn't sure of, though, is if the unit can ever go one way, then the character leaves the unit and does its own thing. Because the way they said it works is once the unit's destroyed, you then place a character with one model as its own unit. But I don't think they defined if there are any mechanics by which you can leave the unit like you used to be able to and join a new unit. Or if you were stuck with that unit for the whole game until it dies.
I thought they said it had to do with list construction.
Okay.
Where you decide that. So, I guess for ease of bookkeeping, I would rather they couldn't leave and join, because I could see that leading to shenanigans really quick.
But at the same time, it's like, well, what if the unit that they've joined is down to one model? Well, that character's not really benefiting, not doing much for anyone anymore because it's one model you'd be giving a benefit to. It'd be really nice if this identical unit over here that's at full strength could benefit from it instead. Can't they just leave that one and join that one and do... Maybe they won't allow us to do that.
Yeah.
At least for now. You know, maybe that'll change down the line if that's something they decide they want to do. People complain about, you know?
And they made it sound like they've tried to tackle the old issue we had with characters attaching to units, which really only existed for a couple of editions.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the, quote, Super Friends units, where because characters could just attach to a unit, you'd pick a unit that didn't really matter or that had a random rule that would just benefit the characters. And you could attach as many characters as you could to that unit.
Right. I'm glad that's gone.
Yeah.
Like that's
because now it sounds like you get one of each of the two character classes can attach to a unit.
But there's also a list of, you know, for each character that can join a unit of what they're allowed to join. Now it's not, you can't join any unit.
Right.
Now it's a specific list. So if you are a Mark 10 armor lieutenant, you can join Mark 10 armor units.
Yep.
You don't get to join Gravis guys. There's a different Gravis character that has that unit on its list that it can join. So it's more specialized that way, and so it's being unique. One, you can't put multiple lieutenants into one unit, and then you have a limited list of the things you can join. It's kind of already eliminating all of that. You know what I mean? And so, like, well, but I wonder where the lines are. You know, and I wonder what the extent is. You know, because like we do have so many lieutenant characters. Are you going to need to have the right model to join specific right units? Mm-hmm. You know, or it's like, can the Gravis captain with Storm Gauntlet only join specific ones, and then the Gravis captain with Plasma Pistol Power Sword can join different units? Like, I wonder where the lines are. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. We have to wait and see about that. It's at least very interesting to start with, right?
And it's good to see that with the one teaser, which is really... what it was a teaser.
Yeah.
It looks like some of the right up front concerns are alleviated to some degree.
Right.
And now it's more the curiosity is like you just said. Now we're just interested in where the lines are, which characters can do what.
Right.
Unit flexibility is now what we're thinking of instead of immediately figuring out the exploit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We also saw some rules for if you want to include allied units, call it that. There will be a defined list of how many and what types you can bring for those kinds of units that don't have their own army, for example. Yeah. So we saw it for the Custodians, not the Custodians.
Agents of the Imperium.
The Agents of the Imperium, but specifically the Arbites.
Yeah.
And how they're brought into an Imperium list. Well, because they're agents, at whatever game point size you're playing, you can bring 2 units of them and then 2 characters, Agents of the Imperium. That's all you get.
Yep.
It's like, okay, cool. That's simple. You don't benefit from any of the Army's rules.
I wonder
you
if
don't
that'll be further
get your own
defined,
thing.
though, by points.
Maybe.
And the reason I say that is because remember when we had the problem with detachments for command points in 8th, and the issue you ran into was but an HQ and 2 troops for Astra Militarum was 132 points,
Mm-hmm.
and HQ and 2 troops for Necrons was like 500 points.
Right.
And so it was severely imbalanced. So I'm wondering if the allies will have a limit, because if it's just like saying a unit, there's going to be some armies that can really grease that.
Yeah. But I don't know if that matters, because they did specifically say, whatever you choose as your army, those are the data sheet rules that you get to, allegiance rules you get to use.
Right.
You don't actually get, because you
don't
include
get to
something
crack open
else.
another codex.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you add something else, doesn't mean you get to also include more rules.
Right.
So, like, you have to rely on the unit itself being good enough.
Filling some role.
Right. Having a purpose. So, I don't know. We'll see. It may be no good. It might just be fluff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I know that just in our own group chat, everybody's mostly excited.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, because all of this just seems so new.
Yeah.
And usually the new can be scary.
It's new, but also kind of familiar.
Right.
You know?
And you know what's funny is they said it would be like that.
Yeah.
So it still feels 40K, but like the data sheets are new to look at. But I love the look of them. But then it's like they're still using things we've seen before, but this does feel very new.
Mm-hmm.
But it is exciting because now we're just hungry for more. Like,
Right.
what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that do?
They also said that, like, knights, for example, don't fit into that ally structure. They have their own way to include a knight. So it's like, well, you could potentially be Space Marines with up to 2 units of agents plus an assassin plus a character plus a knight all in one army. Like,
That's fitting of the Imperium, I guess.
but that fits where kind of I wanted the army to be. You know what I mean? Like, not being able to bring 3 to 5 full-fledged knights or super heavy choices as
I
your
think
ally.
many of us have never been fans of that.
You know what I mean? It's like, I play Space Marines. How many points Space Marines? 250. Well, what's your whole army? Knights. You're not playing Space Marines then.
Yeah, so why is your army on
like,
the tournament list as Blood Angels when you're playing
exactly
3 knights?
Right. So we'll see how that works out. We also saw that they are breaking the bounds of stat caps, which they had already done with strength values previously. Well, now they're also taking the opportunity to break the theoretical limit of toughness and things like that of 10, and now they're giving things toughness higher than 10.
Yep.
But we've already seen some of the data sheet rules for specifically like anti-vehicle weapons now don't care about what the toughness of the vehicle is. It just always wins it on a specific value, right? So there's already some workaround to like being able to bring down these things that are now what we've got teased as strength 9, 10, 12, 14.
Well, and then some things that had a familiar profile for a really long time, like the Hunter-Killer missile was always just a glorified crack missile.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they already teased that today, and it was like strength 14 or something like that. And so it's still 1 shot per game,
right?
But it shows that it looks like they're going to design anti-monster, anti-vehicle weapons specifically to be in that category,
right?
And then not the case with all vehicles, but at least like transport tank level and above. It seems they're going to put their toughness value at a place where you can't roll up there with your 5 dirt cheap infantry that have super special snowflake rules and shoot it down.
Mm-hmm.
They even hinted that the Meltigan might no longer be an anti-vehicle weapon.
Interesting. Okay.
Or that it might still be strength 8, whereas some of these vehicles are now tough 10, tough 12, which we saw in the Repulsor. They claimed the Stomp is going to be T14.
I have to believe that like the Land Raider, the Baneblade, like super heavies
12,
are going to be in that 14, tough 14. I don't think a Stomp is going to be any tougher than
Not like
a Knight or a Baneblade or a I don't know,
super heavy monster if we get them.
See, but that's what I don't know, because they specifically said like the chain fist is against vehicles. They didn't say monsters.
Right.
So I wonder if monsters, the difference is going to be that they've got more wounds.
Could be.
But they're not as tough.
Could be.
Right? So like they can take more punishment and take more bits blown off of them before they stop functioning, but they're easier to
Makes
wound.
them feel a little different.
Right. It's not just a vehicle by another name.
Yeah.
Because that's basically what they were.
Because we saw that the Repulsor still had 16 wounds,
right,
which is what it currently has,
yeah.
but it was now T12.
Right.
And so that's a very different way to handle armor versus monster. You're right. And so far, these stats, they've shown they're willing to change them. Mm-hmm. So you're right. It could be that when Tyranids come out, which they'll probably be early 10th, right? Or right at the beginning, they might have a monster that's still only T7.
Right.
But
Or
now it's got 20
or
wounds
some
something.
vehicles that are lighter vehicles, I would assume would still be less than 9. Because we talked about the
Like a
Rhino.
Viper
And the Rhino is a durable transport. It was always supposed to be, right? In like 6th edition, for example, when you had armor values, it was our AV-12 all the way around, right?
It was 5th edition. You couldn't kill them.
Yeah,
Because
that was
table.
I mean, that was a different thing. But like, just in trying to glance them down and kill them in
Yeah.
like 6th and 7th edition, I think they were AV-12 all the way around.
It's tough. Yeah.
And which is like, well, you need to add up your strength plus a d6 to reach the value to hurt it. So strength 6 and higher is something that could actually even hurt it. Strength 5 and lower couldn't hurt it at all, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah, they might have been 11.
Maybe they were 11. 11, 11, 10. No, 12, 11, 11.
But you still
Regardless.
you still weren't going at them with
Bolters and las
bolt
guns.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. Whereas, like, you could wound monsters back then with those kinds of things,
Yeah.
even though they were
Because they were
tough.
just T6. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, maybe we'll get back to that. That kind of thing. I think 12, 10.
And
10 in the
regardless,
back?
as long as they, and I know it's going to be really difficult because the sheer number of weapons they have to make rules for is just going to lend itself to this happening. But it looks like what they really worked hard on was to try to avoid weapons that just are catch-all, that are good in every situation against every target. Because a lot of additions, no matter how big they get, will devolve to that.
Right.
They'll funnel down to where you had an edition where all meltas were always good, or all power fist on a sergeant always killed everything, or and I think they're trying real hard to avoid that.
Yeah. Well, if they keep the wounding chart the same, I mean, there still is a difference between a strength 8 gun or a strength 8 weapon and a strength 14 weapon.
Yeah.
Call it 16. Call it 8 and 16. When it comes to infantry, right, T4 things, no difference.
Yep.
It will always wound you on a 2, whether you're 8 or 16.
Yep.
But when it comes to a vehicle, now that's actually going to make a difference.
Now it's different.
Because a T14 vehicle, 8, if it's the same kind of chart, would only wound on 5s. 14 or 16 would now wound on a 3. So, like, there's a pretty big difference. So there would be a point difference now between those two things, even though shooting them at infantry would amount to the same thing.
Well, and because they were typically capped on toughness at about 8, unless you went into Forge World, it meant, it felt ridiculous then when you had some of these guns and melee weapons that got up to the string 12, 14, 16, 20. And it's like, theoretically, it might have mattered because you might have needed a 2 somewhere instead of 3. But now it feels like it's really going to matter. And weapons are going to have that role where it's like, well, it's a waste for me to fire this string 12 missile at your T4.
Especially because you're probably going to be paying extra points
Right.
for those extra points of strength because they matter now. So I'm excited to see how that balance shakes out.
Yep.
So
Still early in the league.
but those kind of things we've seen are all very exciting. We saw some special rules that they've not defined yet. I mean, we know what critical strikes are now. That's just cookies on 6s to hit or auto wounding, so you can skip the wound roll, which is cool. That means that you're not going straight to mortal wounds or something. But if you need a 6 to wound something because your gun's not that good, hitting on 6s means you hit that 6 to wound basically, which is nice. That's what they were showing with the lieutenant. He grants that to his unit. So now bolters hitting on 6s now auto wound vehicles. I mean, you get. I know if it applies to vehicles at all, because maybe critical hits don't apply to vehicles.
Maybe that'll be in the rulebook. Yeah,
maybe something like
vehicles.
that. But they're also AP 0, which means the vehicle gets his full save.
Yeah.
So it's like unit of 10 guys double tapping their storm bolters for. Or 5 guys, 20 shots, you're getting 3 wounds through.
And we know that's
through.
probably going to be shocking to people to see so many APs have gone back to 0.
Yeah.
But, I think it's necessary.
Yeah, the game got too lethal. There were too many things that were basically like old editions where it was your full save or nothing.
Well, and I know it got to where if a new codex came out or any kind of data sheet, even when it was dirt cheap, 8 point per guy infantry, you'd look and be like, oh, he's only AP 1. And we got so spoiled by everything needed to be able to kill everything, regardless. And now I think they're trying to roll.
Or we didn't care about saves at all. It's like, what invulnerable do you have? Because either you get a 2-up save versus everything, or you're on your invuln.
On your invuln and your feel no pain. Yeah.
So me too. I'm glad that it's come back down. They've wiped the slate clean a little bit.
They did so far. What they've shown us has been. Not just port forward from previous.
Lots of guns were reduced back down to 1 damage, like the heavy bolter.
Yeah.
It's only strength 5 -1/1 now, like it was before they gave it the extra damage, the extra AP, all that. I'm excited. I have tempered my expectations. I don't know how it's going to look or where it's going, but everything I'm seeing now, I'm treating it like it's a new game, right? There's some familiar mechanics and familiar things, but you kind of have to treat it like it's a new game. You can't ground yourself in the mindset of this. Like, well, how are these changes going to affect the meta I'm used to, my army that I'm used to? It's like it's going to be a completely different thing.
Well, and I think the biggest thing, and maybe it's an easier said than done, but I've noticed our group can do it, but it's hard for what people I think need to do as far as tempering their expectations is not look at 10th, whether by army, by unit, whatever, as either a buff or a nerf to anything they're looking at that's different. It's like, no, it's a whole new game. Right. You have to think about it in the context of this edition against other armies from this edition.
Right.
Don't think about the fact that in 9th edition you were able to fly up with your dirt cheap guys with their basic rifles who had AP3 for some reason and got rerolls on everything. And like in Mortal Wounds, you have to like, nope, what does it do now against now's stuff?
Right. I agree.
But currently, before 10th edition becomes now, they randomly did an update to 9th.
Yeah. They give us a new balanced data slate. It wasn't big. It mostly undid a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then one of the bigger offenders in Space Marines that was making Space Marines do good was the inner circle of Dark Angels.
Oh, yeah. Because the last few tournaments, they just populated
it was just automatic transhuman on every single inner circle model, which the inner circle models were all the best stuff in the army. Right?
Which they were going to take anyway.
It was Blade Guard veterans. It was all their Terminators. It was their free war gear Black Knight bikers. All their characters. Yep. All of them. It doesn't matter what your strength of your gun is. Only wound them on 4s. That was it. And that was on top of all the free stuff you get, and it was basically no cost to a generic Space Marine version of that unit.
Yep.
Like, it was stupid good. There needed to be, like, either a different data sheet, right, for inner circle Marines, where they had a different points cost.
Yep.
Or they needed to put a premium on top of that army. Something. They needed to do something with that army to make the inner circle rule cost something. Because getting it for free it just makes you better. It just makes you better than everyone else.
And I tell you what, there's where my... Because so far they've done well in the reveals in terms of my expectations versus what we're getting. And that sort of thing right there is where my biggest fortress of skepticism remains, is the fact that some armies, at no penalty by points or whatever, just got free rules that were better than everything.
Right.
And so I'm going to be interested to see how they temper that.
How do you tackle that? Give armies the appropriate amount of fluff rules, but that are also impactful in the game without being either stronger or weaker than every other army who has fluff rules. Like it's big. It's like how do you do it? Because
Space Marines every edition end up boiling down usually to like a chapter.
Right.
Everybody's
one of them is the best chapter.
Yeah.
Yep. So now my Blue Marines are now a successor
Space
chapter.
Are now Dark Angels are
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll see. I'm excited.
Hopefully,
we'll see. That was pretty much all the news we had on 10th, I believe. I mean, we have a bunch of new characters coming out on their own. We have Azrael.
Yep.
We have Dante. We've got Bashtor. We have the Lion.
Boom, 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 boom.
Like
4 gorgeous models.
Pretty big, beautiful new models coming out.
Now, the Lion's Blade Guard vets are not different, are they?
No, but it is weird, though, because he's being released with his retinue, which are just the multi-part Blade Guard veteran kit.
I wonder if it'll be discounted at all.
I mean, it's only $100. It's something like that.
So, yeah, because on his own, like Gilliman, he's $60.
He should have been $60. And then Blade Guard vet, I think, are $60 for 3, kind of thing.
A little bit of...
So you get a bit of a discount. Which is fine. I don't have that many Blade Guard vets, and I had 0 of the the posable ones, the multi-part kits.
I have none. I have a starter set.
I only had the starter set ones. And so it's like, yeah, that's fine. Whatever.
Okay.
But me getting him, I think, is going to be a moot point, though.
But before we leap forward to what you're doing with him, speaking of leaping, we did get teased a 10th edition Tyrannid unit.
We did. Leapers.
Not what they do necessarily, but their models. And this wasn't the result of a leak that went out online, and then GW's like, well, whoops, here they are. They just took the initiative and said, boom.
Well, there is a precedent for it, because none of the Seraphim stuff that we had gotten shown was leaked.
True.
Right? The Slan, the Warriors, the Chicken Bird Riders, the new big dinosaur riders with Seraphim on them, the Lizardmen on them, the Croxigors, the Astrolith Bearer, none of it we had seen coming. We had seen some teasers, and they fulfilled some what do you call them? Rumor engines, but we hadn't leaked any of it. Just like that, we got a new Tyranid unit, which is I don't know what you want to call it. It's a new Leaper unit, right? It's called Von Ryan's Leapers, which is a reference to an unknown Tyranid subspecies from 2nd or 3rd edition rulebook.
Right.
There was a genus or a species map for Tyranids that had been written out of what is related to what other creatures, and the Von Ryan's Leapers were on there. So there's some callbacks, some OG, throwing an Easter egg kind of stuff going on here, which people love. Yep. They love to see that. But what I thought was interesting is
I kind of just wish they would have called them Leapers.
I know, me too. Well, people will. People will just call them Leapers.
But you're right. I think they were doing that callback for the longtime fans.
But what's interesting is that species of Leaper was actually in the Gaunt family tree, not the Warrior family tree, like the Lictors. Yeah. So I wonder if Lictors are being replaced by these, or if Von Ryan got it wrong, or something. I would not be surprised if the evolution of the Tyranid creature eliminates, lore-wise, eliminates the need for Lictors and Death Leapers, and these new ones are just going to take their place.
These pack hunters. Yeah.
So I'd be okay with that as an in-lore and as a model reason to get rid of, as a hobby or a business justification reason to get rid of that old kit and just here's a new one.
Right, because they just haven't made a new Lictor.
Right.
And, they gave us a metal / Finecast one in 4th, 5th, and they've just never updated it.
Yeah.
And now I know that the Lictor is one of the originals and a staple of Tyranid stories and battles, and they've really,
iconography,
they've really been playable,
but
but similar to, if this is a replacement and you're talking about an army, a species that is constantly changing to meet whatever challenges they face. When they first rolled into this galaxy, it was with genetic information based on whatever other galaxies, if any, that they had consumed. So when they came here, they had to consume new DNA and change.
Right.
And so these things changing, or referencing callbacks from their lore, I don't care if their stuff changes every edition. I really don't.
Me either.
I'm perfectly fine with it.
Well, think about 7th edition when we got, 4 or 5 new monsters?
6th, but yeah.
Yeah, it was so many new monster kits we got.
7th, yeah.
And people didn't complain about that, right? Did you complain about the Exocrine? No. Did we complain about the Toxicrin or the Maliceptor? Or no, we didn't complain about these new monsters. Why are we complaining about this one? You know what I mean? I don't understand.
And those were
the hesitance.
And some of those names were throwbacks to Epic.
Right.
But the Toxicrin was totally new.
Yeah.
The Brain Bug was new.
Maliceptor.
But it's you're right in that if something changes, if the Tyranids just don't deem the Lictor that effective anymore, in terms of being part of the army proper, they would come up with something else.
Right.
And that's led us to kind of a wish list or what we would be interested in seeing. And it was the fact that in the lore, the Gene Stealers have never really been a part of a proper Tyranid army. They were always a vanguard organism sent ahead to either dispense pheromone trails in cities or ships, or to infiltrate the human population of the cities and ships.
Right.
And then the whole Gene Stealer cult thing happened. And Gene Stealer cults have existed in the lore.
And all we had, though, initially was just the pure strain Gene Stealer organism.
Yeah.
Right? The four-armed, bulbous head, that thing that we're all familiar with. But since then, they've expanded. Think about all the shows they come out with on Warhammer Plus and everything that are all Gene Stealer focused. Gene Stealers are everywhere in those shows. We have a whole other army now that's all Gene Stealer themed. The Gene Stealer cults. They've expanded the lore about how they infiltrate the population and they multiply and they become organisms, mutant hybrids of the organisms they're breeding with,
right,
so that they can seamlessly integrate into the population. Yeah, sure, there are still the originals there that look
Those
like
are usually hidden in the deepest parts.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but now you've got human-looking gene stealers that follow the cult. You know, like they expanded on all of that, and they give us models for all of it. And there's a whole army book for it. That's their home.
Yeah,
that's where they belong in gene stealer cults.
And so we have not necessarily started a campaign for it, but like we've motioned that like
I've started making some posters.
If gene stealers, started a Kickstarter, GoFundMe. If the gene stealer unit left the Tyranid Codex
army book,
and went to just be a part of gene stealers. We've heard some kickback from people that think that, well, no, they've been iconically a part of it. And it's like, yeah, but they were only there because they didn't have their home before.
Right.
Now that they do, and now that Tyranids are getting what sounds like a slew of new releases, they might not need them anyway.
Right.
Like
there may be a precedent with the new, if they get Shrikes like we think they're going to, or if the stat increase for Hormagaunts kind of, infringes on that territory of being fighty like a gene stealer. You don't need gene stealers anymore, right? What if a Hormagaunt all of a sudden is a strength 4, tough 4 attack, re-rolling wounds, melee, 500-pound melee bug now?
Well, and
do we need the gene stealers anymore?
Right. Or even if they slide Raveners into that space,
whatever.
Even if these Leapers slide into that space.
Right.
You now have a whole lot of reasons that you don't need them there.
Right.
Yes, you have a lot of Tyranid players that own probably dozens, if not hundreds, of gene stealers, but it's not like if the little ally matrix we got a whiff of applies across the board, they'll probably still have a way to be included.
Right.
But I agree.
Because that would be a slap in the face. It's like, oh, you've been collecting gene stealers for your Tyranid army all of a sudden, now you can't use them.
Now you can't even use them. Right.
It would be a better solution that was like, if you play a Tyranid's army, gene stealers are not part of it. However, you can now bring in 2,000 points, 2 units of Gene Stealer Cult, and 2 characters from Gene Stealer Cult in any combination you want to. And they could just be pure straight Gene Stealers. Yep. But the rules are in that book. They're part of that army. They don't get high fleet rules for your Gene Stealers you're bringing as a brood brother or agents of the hive, whatever you want to call it. They don't get your army rules because they're not part of the army. But if you want to play them, you can.
Right.
I would love if that was a solution to it.
Same.
And it goes the other way, too. If you play Gene Stealer Cults, you can include some Astra Militarum stuff in the same way. 2 units, 2 characters. I like that as a general, here's a small portion of your army that's allowed to be this supplemental army.
It still lets people do that with limits. And we are all for cleaning up armies.
Yeah, we are.
Anytime Band-Aids can be ripped and hedges can be trimmed, I'm for that.
Yeah. I'm hoping that more Space Marine units go away and get rolled into one another.
Yeah, just drop the name Primaris and just they're Space Marines.
New Bolter Marines are just all called Intercessors.
Yep.
Not Primaris Intercessors. Tacticals are now Intercessors. That kind of thing. Clean it up. Cut the bulk of the book in half.
Yeah.
Cut half the units. They're gone. Sorry. You can use them as other things now.
Yeah, and speaking of using something as other things, you've got an idea for the Lion, the Primarch, that I think is not going to be the way anyone else approaches him.
So we were talking about, and I'll preface this as not starting with the Lion is where these ideas came from. But I've been, sort of kit bashing and painting my Stormcast army to be sort of, I don't want to call it Bretonian. I'm not going to say that, but it's more like my army is a knightly order of Stormcast that are out on missions and quests to go do stuff. So they're all but
they're away from home for long periods of time. Is what you
right? Yeah, that's the headcanon of my Stormcast army, and so they are a very medieval, grounded version of Stormcast. They're not all opulent and and golden, shiny. They are very much living in the world, and so they've got a very simple paint scheme. They have honors. They have knightly colors. They've got tallies of accomplishments. This kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so, starting with that, I've kit bashed a lot of my Stormcast to be that kind of thing. They don't have the normal Stormcast death masks. They've got, knight helmets and stuff that I've either 3D printed or found elsewhere, that kind of thing.
Have you been showing any of that off on your Instagram?
Maybe a couple.
Okay.
Maybe a couple have been out there. But they need a good leader. I like Bastion Carthalos, but he's...
Oh, such a good model.
But he's... I didn't want to edit and change his model because it's so good. Mm-hmm. I painted him my color scheme, but he is still Bastion Carthalos. Same with Yndrasta. She's still a named character. But the Celestin Prime is an interesting character to me because he is so mysterious. He isn't given a name, right? He's just the Prime.
He's a bit like the Sanguinor, right?
A little bit. It's like, I've never seen his face. You don't know who he is, where he came from. He wields Gulmaraz, which is pretty impressive, But the model that they came out with, I've never really been a fan of. The weird swirling vortex. It was a first edition model.
It was.
Right? It was an early one. Never a huge fan of it. The way he floats in this little storm is just awkward. So I want to do a new Celestin Prime, one in the theme of my nightly questing army, and I think the Lionel Johnson is a great candidate.
And it was you saw that model, and the first time we all had a conversation together, you immediately were like,
"Oh yeah, Celestin Prime."
It took you no minutes, 0 minutes to think of that.
100%. I was like, "Yep, I see it already."
Yeah,
because his armor is so classic medieval. Like it is power armor, but it's so
knightly.
It's so knightly, and he is the Green Knight kind of thing, minus his backpack, his power pack backpack. I could give him some kind of wings. I was hoping to have tucked, folded up like bird wings, kind of behind him. But you'd still use his armor and his cape. I'd give him the hooded knight helmet. Come on, sword and shield is fine. I would, obviously trim down the power sword so it wasn't a power sword, it was just a sword. But there was very little I think you'd have to do. I mean, maybe I'd put him up on top of something like it looked like he had flown and landed gingerly on a thing.
A way to get the Stormcast face on him.
Maybe. I don't think I need to. Because like I said, it would
matter. I mean, if you did this and decided to say, enter it in some special event.
Sure.
That would go that step.
Yeah, I could do that.
But I see what you're saying. And what's funny is this week they also talked about designing and painting the lion, and they wanted him to look knightly, even though he's 40k. Yep. They were like, yes, he doesn't have his armor from the Crusade era, but they didn't want his armor to look as regal, as bold as Guilliman's. They wanted it to be knightly, and so it does. I think you're not going to have to do much to defuture it.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's a few things get rid of his pistol on his hip. But he's just got a belt, a normal leather, strapped belt. There's no.
I obviously don't know how many pipes or anything are on him.
I mean, if you look at his bare head from above, you can see his Stormcast ribbed neck.
Oh, Space Marine.
His Space Marine turtleneck.
Yeah.
The tactical turtleneck that they all wear. You can see that. You can see some of the pipes down below. But with the helmeted, hooded head, it covers all of it. It's not a big deal at all. I mean, there's some power nodules. I think I'd fill in how every Space Marine knee pad has that little rectangle notch in it.
Yep.
I'd fill that in because that looks too iconically Space Marine. But besides the backpack and defuturizing the sword, I think it's fine. When I saw his shoulder pad with the lion on it, I automatically thought Stormcast because they all have a golden lion, carved shoulder pad already anyway.
So what are you going to do with the shield?
I'll leave it. Why am I going to mess with the shield? It already looks like an Emperor Karl Franz shield.
I know. What if you cleaned off the eagle? Left it open for your... You could put the heraldry of your Stormcast chamber.
I don't need to.
This would be a 200-hour project for you.
The eagle works. The eagle's fine. I'm fine with it.
You're not going to replace sword with a hammer?
No, don't need it.
Okay.
I could give him a Gulmaraz if I wanted to.
Go for it. Go.
But I like the sword so much.
We'll save the bit. Turn it into use it for something else.
I want him to have the sword though. I'm okay with my.
So what I'm hearing is you're buying two.
Okay,
one that you're going to Golden Demon and one that you're going to for your armor.
I'm fine with my Celestin Prime having a sword instead of a hammer.
Okay.
Because he's not that Celestin Prime. He's my Celestin Prime. Yeah. You know what I mean? He's a powerful character for my Legion that counts as a Celestin Prime. So I don't know. I'll think about it. That sword is beautiful. I don't want to mess with it.
I bet it's just a bit like on a hand,
Yeah.
and so you could even magnetize it.
I've already chopped up all my Galmarazes from my Prime kit. Because the normal Prime has one, and then I gave one to another character.
Could you 3D print one?
Not with the same amount of detail. Because that Galmaraz bit is amazing. I could bits order one or something. Yeah. That would be fine. There is a Galmaraz where he's holding it near the bottom of the hilt, and there's like a lot of hilt above it, and it would work really well for the lion's pose where he's like holding the hammer, like kind of swinging it wide.
We got to jot all this down because you need to have the version that you know is just going to be like slap, done, boom.
Yeah.
And then like if you were thinking, pushing yourself, like
give me the second one and we're good.
Yeah.
But we had gotten to this because we were talking about entries for next year's Golden Demon.
Yep.
And I think while single and unit are cool, those categories tend to be very crowded with really good entries.
Well, right? Single and large for AOS.
I mean, those large too, yes. But even unit is there's usually the top three is like there's usually 3 good entries in unit in every year, and it's like trying to crack that top 3 of that category is difficult too. But those like all those characters of singles, it's just like I'd never be able to win. Not that I think I'm going to, but there's no chance, right? Because those categories are so full. There's always going to be like 20 entries ahead of mine. I'll never get close to the top, I don't think. Whereas with diorama or duel, I think there's room because I think more than the best paint job there, I think they favor a story more than anything, right? Like what we've seen is a good paint job, if not the best one, but also make it quintessentially Warhammer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can tell a great story in a diorama and still do really well and not have the best paint job. And so we were starting with that of like, well, what sells it?
What cool story?
Cool story can you tell? For one of our entries we're going to do, which I think is a mistake. No offense, but one of our buddies had in years prior won. I think was it gold? No, it was bronze on his Snickrot.
Yeah,
his old Snickrot model got a bronze and golden demon one year. And he wants to do the new Snickrot, which just recently came out, and submit that and try to see what he can do with it. Admittedly, he's become a better painter since he has, but the competition is better. But he wants to do his Snickrot in a diorama now instead. And for me, I think that's a mistake because, like, if he wants to challenge himself to see how much better a painter he has gotten, I think he should do it and try to set it up the same way as the original Snickrot entry he did. And
before and after.
If not mimic it, make it reminiscent of the old entry. I mean, he's already changed quite a bit in terms of like color palette and like vibrancy from his old Snickrot. It's fine, but I think putting it in a diorama cheapens it. You know,
it might, and then you have whole different rules when it comes to vibrancy when you're doing a scene as opposed to a model.
Well, because his idea is to have him Snickrot sneaking up on a Space Marine. And like, I think it's going to be a little hard to convey the story of what he's describing. Because the idea is Snickrot is sneaking up on a Space Marine who's caught unawares, but the Space Marine knows something is up. And it's just before the Space Marine like pulls his gun and turns around to see what it is, you know, this is the captured moment right before that happens, right? And it's like, okay, but that's going to be hard to sell in a diorama.
Yeah.
All it's going to look like is Snickrot standing behind a guy in his normal pose.
Correct.
You know, and a lot of the duels that you see in those categories don't look like anything special. It's just two models facing each other in their standard pose. And while sometimes those poses lend themselves to, you know, what looks like a duel, it's, as an observer who's in the know, you can be like, I know you didn't change that model at all. You just made one standing on the sword of the other one.
Right.
Because they're dueling. Or they're just like facing off getting ready to fight. It's like, it's boring. It's not a real duel. It's a pre-duel. You know? Like it's the announcer hasn't yelled fight yet.
Yeah.
It's not a duel yet.
I also think if you're gonna do something like that, where you're going to pull a Sergio Calvo and like manipulate the idea of the category.
Well, that was interesting, by the way. In Sergio's own Instagram post, he said here's the model I won with this, what are they called? What's the squid called?
Mangler.
A mangler. Here's my mangler squid diorama that won at Golden Demon. He even called it in caps diorama, like he was calling out to the judges. Like, mine was a diorama and it wasn't a duel. You gave me the win in the wrong category. Yeah. Like, it's almost like he was a nod to that, because he was like, here is my diorama that I entered. Yeah.
Well, and if you're going to do that, and it's going to be called a duel to have Snickrot sneaking up on someone.
Right.
The only, I guess the concern I have with it is, like, I almost feel like the stories you try to tell like that work better when you don't pick a named character who's already in that exact pose.
Yeah. Well, my idea for a similar thing was, I mean, I got shouted down for it being a Space Marine in my example, but what I wanted to do was have like a row of bushes and an orc commando, if not Snickrot, fine, a commando hiding on the other side of the bushes surrounded by bodies. And he's got his arm up inside of a breastplate and a helmet, and he's like puppeting one of the guys he's killed, and he's getting the attention of another soldier on the opposite side of the bushes. And the guy's like, huh? And he sees like the orc hand up inside of the helmet and breastplate, and there's just like, the orc is just has succeeded multiple times, and there's just dead soldiers around him with this ploy.
He keeps just luring them over.
Yeah. That was my idea. And it's like, I said Space Marine initially, where it's like, it could be a commando knob.
Yep.
And he's just clubbing Space Marines to, whatever. It's fine. But, like, have the breastplate on his forearm and, like, the hand inside of the helmet calling people over. And, like, that was my idea. And I think that would be really funny. My other idea was actually having to do with Seraphim, the new Seraphim that come out this summer. I think it's the right timing such that there's enough of a window to get it done in like the 6 to 9 months before Adepticon. It's a new model for the year, so it's something no one's done before because it's just come out, and it's enough time to get it done.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the balance you have to do. Is you kind of don't want to do an old model that people have seen before. So like even if you paint it immaculately, if it's either won a competition since it's come out, or people have seen good examples of it multiple years, yours looks a little less special. Unless you do something amazing, right? But so I was going to do a Croxagore using, it was going to be in diorama, a Croxagore mid-spawn, in a spawning pool. Because, the lizard men still are born in pools using magic. They're not born the good old-fashioned way. Mm-hmm. Out of eggs. But I was going to have, like, some of the new skinks and skink priests, whatever, standing around a spawning pool that is made of, lizardmen ruin kind of type of stairs or whatever. And it would just be, like, on a, I don't know, like 150 mil base. It'd be that kind of size. It was just a big pie plate. The whole thing is just the spawning pool itself. You could do some things with water effects on it. But it was going to be kind of like...
out of the water.
Kind of like, the scene from Thor... with the deleted
Thor
scene.
2.
The deleted scene. No, where was it? Infinity War. It was one of the Avengers movies. It was Age of Ultron.
It was Eric Selvig was supposed to go down in the pool with Thor, and he was going to talk to the old Asgardians.
Where it's just a pool of water, and he's like bursting out of the water, and there's just water splashing, and his hair is flipping back, and it's just bare-chested.
Chris Hemsworth. Yeah. Beautiful man.
That scene, but instead of it being Chris Hemsworth, it's a Croxagore, right? And so he's bursting out. He's just born. A little bit of Chris Hemsworth, a little bit of Uruk-hai being pulled out of the amniotic sac that is buried in the dirt.
Yep.
Whatever that was. Yep. A little bit like that. You're fully grown, born fully grown is the idea. And so he's splashing up out of the water. No armor, no weapons, nothing. It's just a naked Croxagore. And then it's just like skink priests around the outside just like chanting for him to be born.
Yep.
That's the scene. You'd have some interesting water effects, splashes.
Yep.
You'd have some, like, make the water, bright blue glow, like I don't know, bioluminescent blue algae, that kind of thing. Try to get that effect, where it's that nice, comforting blue glow in the water. And just some skinks and a splashing Croxagore. That's it. Telling a story. Though I guess it could look like he was just taking a bath.
Right. They've all just got brooms. It's like how you wash an elephant with sponges.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but that does tell a story, and everybody would know immediately what it is.
Right. Oh, anyone who knows anything about Seraphim would know what it is.
Yeah.
They would like, oh yeah, this is a spawning pool. You know, we know from Total War what sacred spawnings are. They talk about spawning pools in the new lore for Seraphim. That's still a thing. You know, they talk about how the two units of Kroxigors they're coming out with, the one's a normal one and one's a spawning in the Age of the Beast, whatever, in Gur. So they're a little more infused with beast energy, so they're a little more crocodile-like instead of lizardmen.
Primal.
Yeah, and so like they've already talked about that as a principle in the army already. You know,
You don't think they should have had bowler hats and cigars?
I mean that would be funny too.
Like, was that Hordes?
Oh my god, yes.
Machine Horde.
So are you talking about the guys who live down in Louisiana?
The Cajun Crocs?
Yeah, the Cajun Crocs. Oh my gosh, yeah. Jeez. Yep.
But, you know, Lizardmen getting that massive update. Tyranids getting this massive update.
Yeah. Summer's gonna be busy.
There's an army that's been left behind and all that, which we've talked about repeatedly, and that is Skaven.
Uh-huh.
And we found that funny because they were doing some discussion with the community about what army they would like to see in 40k, and people pointed to the Harud, or basically the rumors of this idea that there are rat people in the 40k universe. So why not bring Skaven to 40k?
Yeah.
Now,
People are like, yeah, that's super cool. Let's do that.
I'm actually against it.
Yeah. I don't think they need it.
But you had a comment you were leaning on
Yeah,
that you didn't go
I
with.
didn't pull the trigger on it because it was a little too catty, right? It's a little too.
Just disagree.
Yeah. Because it was like, yeah, let's Skaven in 40k, awesome, let's do it. I'm like, my initial thought was, before we add new models for Skaven in 40k, maybe we should give some to the AOS where they're actually an army first.
Yeah.
Because it's like
They've got none.
they got none. Like nothing. Like there's so many units that are as old as we are, pretty much.
And someone,
maybe
asked,
not quite,
someone
but-
actually asked them that at the Q&A.
Yeah.
It was like, what about Skaven? And it was like, well, design team,
Needs inspiration. And it's like, we're not asking you to design new clan rats. The clan rat kits are
They're whatever.
10 years old. They're
Yep.
still plastic. They're monopose. They get the job done. Whatever.
Yep.
They're fine. We're not talking about those ones. We're talking about the 28-year-old, Ikit Claw model that you ported over. We're talking about the
25-year-old.
the $60 for 3 old metal model Globadiers.
Right.
We're talking
Or
about that.
all of the weapons teams.
Yeah, all the weapons teams, all of the normal rat ogres are all metal because you cut the plastic ones that were in Isle of Blood.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no rat ogres besides these old derpy.
And it's funny,
You
the first thing, I remember we had brought this up, and the first thing someone said before you listed all that was like, well, but the clan rats are fine. And it's like, we're not talking about that.
Right.
We're talking about the ones that you have to eBay order. Or,
right. We're not talking about the only models they stick into starter boxes for Skaven. Right. You're going to get 1 billion of because that's the only. They've got 4 units that are plastic and they're in every single starter box. We're not talking about those ones. We're talking about the good ones in the book that everyone wants to play but can't because the models are not available for cheaper than $1 million per army. Because it is insane. If you want to run 3 units of 5 acolytes, we're talking about purchasing 5 blister packs at $60 per 3. That's insane. That's $300 for 15 models.
That costs how many points?
I don't know, like 150. No, it's more than that. 180.
Yeah.
It's because they're like 12 points each or something. It's $300 for 120 points of your army.
And
That's insane.
I would go so far as to say that the results the army somehow puts up in the AOS Meta Watch, which isn't great, but it's like middle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because of any of those units, because most people are not playing those units.
Right.
Because they just can't, they either can't get them or the models just look awful.
Now, I'm fortunate enough that I have a ton of those that were given to me.
You wish they weren't.
But I don't want to play them. I don't want to paint them.
Yeah.
I don't want to paint 25-year-old metal models. A lot of them are brown. Like they've tarnished. I don't want to clean those and paint
just
those.
weathered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically Clan Scryer, besides Storm Fiends, because all their main character, their weapon teams, their Giselles, all of it's metal. Their battle line, like rats, it's all metal. Same with assassins.
Yeah.
Yeah. The gutter runners and night runners. I mean, I think they did a plastic kit, but it's 20 years old at this point, and they look horrible. But that part of the army literally only has those 2 units. That's it.
I think The army rules need a restructure to account for that if they plan on just never fleshing out the different clans.
Yeah.
Or cut things entirely. And then they need a release like the Seraphim are getting.
Yeah.
With like
Which is
8
like,
kits.
Just like 8 kits. That's all they need, Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't mean to go down that.
Yeah, I don't want to go down that rat hole again, because I've been down there before.
Yep.
It's a personal gear of mine that's being ground.
But otherwise, AOS was quiet recently with the 40k 10th stuff. Except we have 2 new Battletomes dropping.
Yeah, it should be out this weekend. There's already, I'm sure there's already been some reviews out there that you might have been able to see. I saw some dumps of some info on those. Very much in the realm of reworked books rather than like all new rules for books. Yeah. So like Vampires, for example, the book is so much better. It really is. Mostly because everything kind of has a clear-cut role. There's not a lot of overlap in what units do anymore.
Soulblight Gravelords, which contain a particular unit of character vampires that I think 450,000 people have now painted on social media.
Well, they got better. Okay. Finally got better. Prince Duval and the Crimson Court. They might actually be one of my favorite Underworld warbands in AOS. They're a little pricey because they're like 220 points, something like that. But it's 15 wounds for 220. It's a 1-cast wizard. His spell is really good. It's only 6-inch range, but it's +1 hit and wound versus a single unit within 6, which is a great buff.
Right.
He has this really cool thing where if he and his unit are both fighting the same unit, you give your opponent the opportunity to choose one of 2 effects. Effect number 1, Prince Duval gets an additional point of rend. Or, you cannot attack Prince Duval this round. Those are the 2 things you have to choose between. Either you can't attack him or he fights you better. It's like, that's kind of a cool little rule.
It is.
And so, like, the fact that the vampires in his unit, too, went up from 1 wound each to 3 wounds each. And then Gorslav, it's not Gorslav. Whatever the enforcer is, the guy with the mace, is 4 wounds instead of 3. So, like, the unit itself went way up in durability, which was good because it was a 5-wound unit before, and now it's a 10-wound unit. That's great. I really like the Crimson Court. I like most things in the army. I like the changes they made to most things. There's some general flattening of damage across the army, so all vampires just do 2 damage now. Most characters do 2 damage now on other weapons, which is very consistent with 3rd edition and how they've done with that. They added some rend to the army, which it needed. They took some of the killiness away from some of the chaff units. So one of the biggest grievances I had was that certain units just were stupid good. Like zombies, just naked zombies, they were some of the most ridiculous units in the game. Because you could stack multiple +1 attacks on them, and then they had cookies of 6s to hit or mortal wounds. And every guy they killed, they added a zombie to the unit. So it was like, this is one of the most efficient units in the entire game.
Yeah.
Because they only hit on 5s.
It's its own recycling system.
Yeah, they only hit on 5s, and so half the time they hit 5 or 6s. It's a mortal wound, you don't have to worry about wounding at all. Too good. So they moved the 6 to wound being immortal. They moved the cookie of 6 to the wound roll instead of the hit roll. And they made it so that you only get that if you have a corpse cart nearby. So now there's some counterplay to it. You can snipe out the corpse cart.
And now they're chaff, like they're supposed to be.
And now, but they also gave them the ability that when they die, they explode. So it'll 5 up, they do a mortal wound when you kill them. So now instead of them having massive damage output in melee, now they have a little bit of defensive damage output, but can have a similar, like, offensive output with the right support. I think it's a much better system.
And then an army that you were on early hated how broken the catapult was, and then the army got their only FAQ, I guess you could say, and has been terrible ever since.
Yeah.
The Ossiarch Bonereapers.
Yep.
They're coming along too.
So they got the 3rd edition treatment, so lots of damage flattening across the armies. They got rules interactions with the actual edition now. Instead of having their own version of CPs, command points, now they have proper command points, and they got a lot of them. Okay. And they have their own command abilities that are not unique to once per phase. So they're all really good. You can use them multiple times. Units can issue to them to their own units. There is, again, clear-cut roles for different units in the army. Most of the units got an upgrade. They're all better. I'm trying to think if there's any unit that's not better. Nope, they're all better. There's more synergy in the book now. So there are 2 different shaper units. One of them who's like putting together and floating I think you've seen the model before, where he's like reconstructing the torso of a normal soldier. And the new one, he's like raising the head of what looks like a Morghast. That's the new character. Well, each of those different characters benefits based on the thing they're resurrecting. Those types of units. So the guy on foot benefits the actual guys on foot. The one that's resurrecting the monster head is good at benefiting monsters. And they're real buffs. Like, they're really good. The new guy is, I think, basically enables an entire new archetype of army, which is just the monster heavy army. Or the elite heavy army of Ossiarch Bonereapers.
And disclosure, I wish they would have gotten a little more to their roster. I wish they would have gotten just even a new kit that made like 2 units or something.
Yeah.
And the character. I feel like that's not too much to ask for most of these armies that have such small rosters. But
I would like to see just a bow unit.
Yeah.
That's all I like to see. Because there is, within one of their Underworld warbands, a guy with a bow. Why not give a unit of guys with bows? You know? Like. And
I remember when they were doing Underworlds and then Warcry, they were talking about how this is some of the design studio inspiration. Mm-hmm. Drawings or whatever they come up with. And it's like, we'll do it then.
Yeah.
Make that into a unit. We know with their CAD process, that's probably not hard to take that one archer they designed for an Underworld unit and like 4 different poses and tweak the bow look a little bit and unit of 5, 100%. Unit of 10.
Yep.
So there's been enough coming on the horizon to really keep us full, especially for both the gamers and the painters. And now that we've had this many mimosas, we might want to also go get ourselves full.
I agree. Sweet.
Let's see.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed. Check out our new episodes every Friday on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible, or on Podbean. You can also follow myself and Llama on Instagram for more. We are at Hyena Paints Minis and at Llama Paints Minis. And as always, we'll catch you next time.